I know there's some assignments on there that I need to take off, and I know I need to grade stuff today.
I've just been in that office. And she said,
So automation is talking about the machines, the analyzers, methodology. So I was reading something the other day that they were asking, what is the gold standard now in blood bank? And everybody said that the tube method is still the gold standard, because what are you gonna do when your machine goes down? You're gonna be doing the tube method. So automation makes things faster, it standardizes things. You know how we're grading reactions, so it standardizes the reaction grading. So it can reduce operating costs if you do enough tests. Like the VA, I think they don't do enough blood bank tests to have a machine that has to be validated regularly and running QC every day and all that stuff. So if you do enough work, there are benefits to having a machine. So they talked about the concerns among staff as like job replacement as one of the things that people worry about when they get automation. I just don't see that. I don't see how that's possible. Because even when you use the machine, we still have to make the decisions, and we still have to identify the antibodies. Like, it will run the test, and it gives you your 1+, 2+. You still have to figure out what the antibody is, rule everything else out, so I don't see them ever replacing blood bank. Y'all can go look over this whenever, if you want to. I know you probably don't want to. So the two things that we really talk about in blood bank is solid phase red cell adherence and gel. And so those are the two, if you get to use the machine, that's what you're gonna be using. So the instruments can do ABO and RH testing, so forward and reverse testing, antibody detection and identification, and it can cross match. We didn't do automated cross matches where I worked. Some places do, and you can do an immediate spin all the way through AHG cross match. So hemagglutination assays is like what you do in the tube. And so that's like your forward and reverse testing. So the machine does it just like you do it. So it drops the A1 cells and the reagents and a little bit of the serum in the wells, and it incubates them and just looks for agglutination, and that's how it does it. It does it just like we do in the tube, but in these little microtiter plates. Samples are barcoded, reagents are barcoded, it's easy, so you just stick your stuff on there, it does the test for you. And then it literally reads it with a camera, and your printout will have a picture of the results showing the agglutination, and then it will grade it. So it's doing exactly what you do in the tube. It just does it for you. So solid phase is used for both indirect antiglobulin tests and direct antiglobulin tests. When I started working with solid phase, the direct antiglobulin test didn't even exist. And so that has come a long way. So in solid phase, the microtiter wells, which is that little plastic strip, it looks like there's nothing in it. The reagents are bound to the bottom of those wells. And so patient antibodies, if present, so it takes the plasma, the patient's plasma, and drops it in those little wells. If the antibodies are present, then they'll attach to the corresponding antigens that are bound to the bottom of those wells. So it literally takes like pieces of the red blood cell membranes and attaches it to the bottom of those plastic wells. So it looks like they're empty, but there is reagents in there. If it's negative, it forms a button at the bottom of the well. And so you need to know how to interpret those reactions. So there may be only one or two questions from the test from this chapter. On the test from this chapter. And you can write this on that PowerPoint somewhere if you want to. end of the antiglobulin test with solid phase, if you have a smooth layer of cells across the bottom of the well, that is a positive reaction. So it's opposite of what we've been doing. Like, we've been grading for agglutination, looking for a button. It's opposite with solid phase. If it looks like there is no agglutination, that's a positive. A button at the bottom is negative, so just remember it's backwards. There will be no button in a positive reaction, because those reagents are spread out across the bottom of that well, and if the cells stick all to the bottom of it, they're not allowed to make a button. If they're not sticking to anything, if there's no reaction happening, then they all fall to the bottom. Does that make sense? Give me an example of an anti-human globulin test. Yeah, it's an IAT, so that's just another name for it. But what is one? We've done one in class. The antibody screen. Anything you go through AHG. So antibody screen, antibody panel. We may do an antibody screen today, and if it's positive, do a panel. We'll see how much time. So those are anti-human globulin tests, which is the same thing as the IAT test. And this reagent is also used in the DAT, right? So you have to know what the tests are called, what they're used for. So this is what the solid phase wells look for. This is what they look like, not what they look for, what they look like. So this is a positive, can y'all see it? So there's no button. This is a negative. So, oh my gosh, this is a side view of it. And so you can't see it, but the antigens will be coded all along the inside of that well. It adds a potentiator and patient's plasma or serum. They incubate. If there's an antibody reaction happening, they'll attach to it. If there's any unbound globulins that are in the plasma, like other antibodies other than what you're looking for, that does a washing phase, just like we do when we're washing our tubes. It washes anything that's unbound away and uses these cells. So it has to have something so those wells look like they're empty. And then you're adding patient's plasma to it. So if you're still looking for agglutination, you're not gonna be able to see it without there being some red cells there. And so this methodology uses something called indicator cells, and it adds those cells to it. And then it centrifuges it. If there's agglutination happening, those indicator cells is what attaches to the well or just falls to the bottom. And the indicator cells allows you to see agglutination. Since there's no actual, we're doing a panel, we're adding each of those little bottles of red cells. That allows us to see agglutination. But here, that well, when you're looking at those wells, they look like they're empty. Then you add plasma to them, even if there's something happening, you can't see it. So the indicator cells, they're just there to allow us to see if something's happening, if there's agglutination or not.
And they're already in there, right?
So they come in a little bottle, just like the bottles that we're using in class, but it's a special type of cells, and the machine adds it to it. So it'll add patient's plasma, it'll add some of this list, which is purple liquid. It's just like PEG, but without the polyethylene glycol in it. And then it'll add in 1 drop of those indicator cell suspension, and then it centrifuges. So that's at the end of the test. That's like the AHG part. After it washes, adds a drop of those, centrifuge, and then it reads for agglutination. And so this is what we said already. A positive test, they form a mono layer across the bottom. They spread out. Negative, and there's a button at the bottom. I don't know what that is. this is just the names of the machines. The only one I've ever used is the capture system, the Immucor machines. I've used the Galileo Echo, and the new one is called, I forgot. So when you're using these machines in clinicals, write down what you're using. So if you decide you don't wanna work there, because when you leave, you're not gonna remember what that thing was called. So write down everything that you're using and what you did. That way, when you go apply somewhere else and they're saying, well, what departments did you work in? Oh, I worked in chemistry and blood bank. Oh, what machine did you use? What methodology are you familiar with? You can say, I worked with the Galileo Echo in the blood bank. I worked with solid phase. I worked with whatever in chemistry. Because you're gonna forget. You're gonna sound like you know what you're talking about if you can tell them what you were using. So gel. Ortho makes the gel machine. It uses these gel cards. And it adds the sample to it, and the same thing, it's looking for agglutination. So if the sample agglutinates, it gets stuck at the top of that gel, and they're not allowed, the cells aren't allowed to go to the bottom because they're too big to travel through the gel when it's centrifuged. If it's negative, the cells will travel all the way to the bottom and make a button in the bottom of the tube. And so this is what it looks like. So this is a positive, and this is a negative. And that's it. So I just wanted to show you how to read them. So just know how to interpret gel and how to interpret solid phase. So there's one more thing I wanted to tell you for the test. So with any new methodology that you're bringing in, there's 4 things that you have to do. Okay, well 3. So it has to be validated. So any new methodology. And so this is not just with blood bank machines, it's with any new method you're bringing in, even if it was manual, you have to validate it. Everybody has to be trained. And you have to have written procedures. So the supervisor will do all this background work. And most of the if you're buying a new machine, they send people from that company out to do this part of it. And so they do a lot of the hard work for you because they want you to buy their machine. You just have to know that what steps are involved. Like, even though you're using this machine and you don't see anything going on in the background, you run QC every day, and that's it. Somebody else is doing all this stuff in the background. And so we got a new software that came with the machine we were already using before I left. And it came with this nice spiral bound book that gave you all the results with colored pictures and everything. It showed you exactly what to do if anything happened. And they told me I had to write a procedure for it. And I said, you gotta be joking. You gotta be joking. This is the procedure. It shows you exactly what to do in this really nice book. CAP says you have to have a written procedure. So I had to write my own, even though we had that book. So you can only use that book as a reference. I had to have a procedure. And they told me, after I put in my month's notice, that I had to have it done before I left. Well, it took a long time. I had to get it signed off by the transfusion services medical director, and it was a huge, thick project.
You just copy paste that?
No, I barely finished. When I tell you I barely finished, I mean, what would they have done if I just left? I didn't want them to be, putting me on the no rehire list. I did it, thank goodness. It was a really good experience,
Yeah.
but I was sweating. Like, how am I gonna finish